All right, here we go. Here we go. We are live on the show, of course, the official NRL Fantasy Podcast live Q&A here on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. If you're listening later on, Paulie G in the house, Daniel Long and Erik Wells. How are we?
Life's good. It's imminent now, so strap yourselves in, get excited because fantasy's begun.
Erik, how are you?
Yeah, good mate. Had a cracking weekend away, watching the footy in the middle of nowhere, and good to be back in civilization and watching some good footy for the weekend.
You had to get the KO working yourself at
Yeah, had to use my
local
own login
establishment.
at the club. They
That's
had
all right.
their subscription run out, but saved the day. No dramas.
And of course, 6 p.m. today, we got a live update of teams, which is something we're going to do every Thursday. It gives that opportunity to update teams. So the 6 p.m. game, no changes so far for Knights and West Tigers. And of course, at 7, just before we go off and you head to Channel 9, Foxtel and KO to watch the game, we'll read out the team lists, the final team lists for the Roosters and the Broncos. But Longy, already a big change because Nat Butcher's out.
It's absolutely massive, isn't it? So Suo Wong steps in. If it was a long period of time that Butcher was going to be out, then I'd be looking at Suo Wong. But I think it's the Wong call to jump on right now. Really temporary time period. He'll be in that starting spot. So I wouldn't adjust things too much. But what I would give an uptick to is Nafahu White's score for tonight.
To Watson or not to Watson, asks Ross Lapthorne. That is the question. He's got Starling and Mamazelos, so maybe he can go get Munster and Marju, some good guys to get. How good is footy? Erik, you've been tossing up to Watson or not to Watson. Where have you ended up?
Look, I from even a few years back used to love jumping on Jazz Tavega. Now that he's got that hooker spot positioning again, and just the lineup, I thought, look, he might be a shout instead. So I moved away. I was able to improve elsewhere as well because obviously there's a bit of a cash down. So I think if you've got two centres, I think you're happy. And I mean, Starling did a great job, right? You've got Starling as well, Paulie. So I think you did your job. So I reckon if you've got it solid up, like you can bring up some of maybe those 200k players instead. So you're not maybe running as many of those. Instead, you can try and aim at the roulette of getting the right 400k player instead, or even a little bit more with Ross's questions here with Marju and Munster. Just that kind of that next level. There's spots that you're going to be happy with, I think. So I reckon you can go without Watson. I think we're hoping for a little bit less Docker Clay involvement, but I think with him being named, it's going to shift around that Watson movement and also the Nat Butcher. I don't think we're going to see Watson's true involvement tonight because of that.
Yeah, well, Longy, how do you think the minutes will go? Aussie Frostking's asking, will White play 55, for example? How much does Wong play? How much does Watson play? Does he move to lock?
Shout out to Aussie Frost King too. He was floating around first place a lot last year, so weapon of a fantasy player. I feel unqualified to give you advice, mate. Look, White 55 minutes this week, absolutely. Next week probably as well. But when Lenu comes back, when we see a few of these other players like Egan Butcher yet to come back as well, I think he drops back to 40 minutes and the scores won't be as good. I do think with Connor Watson, I'm off Connor Watson as well, so I jumped off to make space for Cam Munster. But he's played with Zach Docker-Clay twice, and he has had 80 and 70 minutes in those games. And they need him to play a bit of lock tonight as well. So I think he'll be okay. I mean, we saw Starling, your genius pick there, Paulie, play at lock as well. We're seeing Cook do it a bunch too. Like, he's definitely going to do it for St. George. I think it's a more common strategy than we're all realizing. So I wouldn't worry as much. The risk for Watson is if there's an injury in the back line, he slides out there, and that's what can really kill you.
Connor Watson and the rain, we're not seeing as much as maybe was forecast as well. So I'll probably, even though just with the makeup of my team, there's no way I can get him in. But if I was in those dilemmas, I'd probably get him in. And if I had the money to get Nafo White, I'd probably also do that. I think I'm just a little bit short for White, but I like both those players.
Yeah.
Gus or Preston, and why really torn? Asks CK. That's not the CK, is it? I don't think so.
Imagine that.
Welcome back. Well, I've got Jacob Preston, so I might, maybe I am the one to ask. But Longy, what are you thinking?
Oh, this is tough. I mean, you've got the young buck coming through, unlimited potential, scored that big dummy half try. And you've got Gus Kryon, who just gets it done every year. I'm on Gus Kryon, and can't you imagine it? The Roosters are struggling a bit. He gets the ball, does a few of those crab runs, throws a few offloads, takes it on himself, and suddenly he's at 40 points, and we're 10 minutes in. That's kind of what I'm hoping for there. So I'm on Gus, but I don't mind the Preston pick either. Just keep an eye on how that bench goes with the rotations with Tupanua and Salmon. They could maybe steal minutes off him. So, yeah, I'm on Gus, but both are good options.
A 69 and a 57 are the two predicted scores for the next 2 weeks for Jacob Preston. That's why I'm getting him. Oliver D'April, Marky Mark on the bench or emergency. That's another guy, Mark Nawanga Nitawaze, Erik, that I was hoping to get, but I just can't quite get up to him. So it's probably going to be Sandon Smith instead.
So I think the question here is to put him in a scoring spot or not. But I guess that question is around who's there to take up the other spots if you're going to put him in the emergency. So that's the tricky part. So it'll be interesting to know who your other three are or four on your bench to know what those options are. I think he'll do okay.
I think playing.
Yeah, I think he did. He certainly redeemed himself in that second trial. And he's also got that centre wing fullback spot as well. So if you've got him there, it means if he goes well, he'll look after a spot for you if the worst happens and someone's a late scratching as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, Dom Griffin is back. Good to see you, Dom. And he's wondering if he rides the Lightning on centres with Bird and Shibasaki or join the herd and grab Lucas Longy. Shibasaki, I am certainly have never been on the Shiba train, I've got to say. Sorry to the Gemahats fans out there. There's many of them. We were sitting here years ago with Luke and Brad. I think it was the middle of COVID and doing a show very similar to this home for the first time, one of the first times, and there was a massive amount of Gehamat love. So I feel like I've gone back to the future, to be honest, with all this, but didn't trust it then, and I don't trust it now.
I can give you some numbers. So historically, a 32 average when he starts at centre. The question is, do you expect an uptick from him playing at Brisbane? Do you think their attack's going to be good? It is going to be good, right? You look at their team, I think defensively they might have some challenges, but in attack they'll be absolutely fine. So you take that 32, which is already 10 points of value because he's priced it at 22, and then you probably bump a few more points above that, and he looks like pretty surefire value if he can hold the spot when Stags come back in 4 weeks. So that's the one gamble there, but I think Shibasaki's a fine option. Saying that, I am running Lucas myself. I think Lucas goes over for a double against the Tigers this week and sort of shows out, and everyone's scrambling to get him next week.
Erik, you can always get Lucas and play him in the edge as well.
Yeah, so that's where he's sitting for me at the moment, just because he was just the solid option I had for another edge spot. But the plan is always to get another solid edge player in there so he gets to shuffle down to that centre spot, and then you never have to worry about it. So I think if you've got the option to get him in, I think it's a no-brainer. He's going to end up top 3 for the position, so get him in while you can.
Mason Miller wants to know if Jack Bird is still a viable play. Off the bench in the preseason game, Longy, he scored a try, which helped boost his fantasy score in that game. I'm not sure if he's going to be doing that every week, but he might be able to be his work rate be high enough to make some money because he's very cheap.
Yeah, if he can play about 55 minutes, he should average about 40 points based on past data. So it's just a question of, do you think he comes on and plays big minutes off the bench at lock? Now, it makes sense, right? If you have Twile, you can start him, take the early bruises, move him into the prop rotation, bring Bird on to be creative. I think a team would be smart to do that. So I think he's still an option you can keep. Not in my team right now, but if he plays well in this game, I might look to buy him next week, or he might even find his way back into my team before games. Like he's a very solid option.
Yeah, I like the idea of just watching a week because I don't think his price is going to get away from us.
Yeah, agree.
I'm holding. I've got him still, so he's sitting in the back of the bench, and I feel like I've got him. So worst case, his price is just that little bit higher. So worst case, if I need to go somewhere else, if he doesn't fire, I've got that option. So
Storm played the Eels this week, and they are probably the only game that's going to be unaffected by weather. So JC's got a good question. Hot on Brown at the moment with news of Moses out. He's a 55 plus average when that happens. So that's a big bod, Longy.
Yeah, I
But
dug into the numbers.
and
Yeah, so you go.
encouraged. Yeah, I was going to say encouraged by the fact that it's going to be a nice day down in Melbourne on Sunday.
Yep, a lot of eyes on Dylan Brown right now. So he's got to put on a big performance here if he wants sort of contract talks and all that to go in the direction that would be good for him. But I looked at the numbers, and Volkman historically hasn't been a big kick meter guy. He did have one game where he pumped out 600 plus though, so potentially he takes a bit more of that role. I'm uncertain. I'm not. I'm a Para fan, right? So I want to be hopeful, but I think the Storm will get Parramatta in this game, and I think the score could be reasonably low for Dylan Brown this week.
It's a shame Melbourne have a bye next week because I could easily jump on 3 or 4 of their players.
Yeah, I've got two.
oh,
Riding it. Yeah, Munster looks outstanding, and so does Uto. Josh C, thoughts on Hopgood, especially with their bench and his minutes? We'll come to you, Longy, but let Eric just jump in quickly first because obviously Longy is a Para fan. But what's your thoughts, Eric?
I mean, Hopgood's just one of those guys that you love to have in your team because he's just fun to watch. Sits in the middle, gets through a massive amount of work. He's just one of the guys that by the end of the year you want him in your side. So and the dual position is a no-brainer on top of that because a lot of those players lost their dual position this year. He managed to retain it, so we're pretty happy about that. So. And his price, I mean, his price is at $7.43, so it's not out of the realm because he's been at 800, I think, before as well.
Yeah,
so
I paid 800 for him last year, and he
yeah,
was fine. He was on track, except for then the injury, obviously. You going to get him?
Yep.
I can't get him. I wish I could. It's just that little bit too much. If he was, it's just that extra 100k that's put him out of the realm for myself. But if you can make him work, he'll. I'm sure he'll do you justice for having him in your side.
Tommy Tarima asks Hopgood and Riley Smith or Seyfarth and Gilbert, Longy.
Oh, tough one. I mean, you go on mid-ranges versus Gun and Cash Cow. If Riley Smith was starting, I'd say Hopgood and Riley Smith, but as it stands, I think Seyfarth and Gilbert are very safe options at that price. Dual position gives you a lot of flexibility. I'm going to say Seyfarth and Gilbert here.
I think Gilbert's a trap.
Ooh, the club captain.
Yeah, I think everyone uses bandies around the word trap now for people that are just not not going to go on fantasy. I think a true trap is someone like Gilbert, right? Someone that passes all the tests on paper, but it just doesn't work out. That's a real trap for Mike. And I think all these other names, people are saying, "Oh, he's a trap. He's a trap." I think you're not using the real terminology. I think someone like Gilbert is your classic trap, where he's had 2 season-ending injuries in a row, long-term injuries, and I just don't think he can come back at that level straight away. And I think it's going to be similar to when Tino Fa'asuamaleaui went up to the Gold Coast after his good time at the Storm, and he didn't hit the averages that we expected. He actually lost money, and then eventually he did. I think Gilbert he'll probably be something similar, and he does have the potential to score quite low. And then obviously all the difficulty around the Dolphins and the Cyclone Alfred as well. It's not in their favour. Souths, I think, for mine now become favourites.
That's a big call. Look, everything you're saying there makes sense. And your logic, you've called a few of these before, Paulie, where you've absolutely nailed them. So you're making me think about it a bit. But I look at Gilbert and I think the historical numbers are good. He's about 10 points of value. He needs to play about 60 minutes. That's the big question. And the fact that Max Plath is on the edge makes me feel like it's probably going to be okay. So I'm pretty happy about Gilbert, but we'll come back next week and we'll see what the scores are.
Darcy wants to know Gilbert versus Seyfarth. That's a tough one because Seyfarth, he could also be a trap. Erik, it's possible,
Well,
right?
could be. We were together when the team list dropped, Paulie, and I know as a Tigers fan you weren't too thrilled on some of those that were named and how it's all lining up for them. So, look, hopefully, and well, even just in the general position, the Knights generally allow second row is actually a fair amount of leeway, funnily enough.
Yeah.
So that they
I think
score
Seyfarth
generally
will be
well.
fine. Unless he gets pulled early, which we saw happen, was it a year ago when he started and made a couple of errors and Benji pulled him for the match?
Or the other side, someone else gets injured and he gets pushed to centre a lot. So that's the other problem with him. It's a matter of utility.
Surely Jack Bird will go to centre if
Could do. So they have the options to shuffle it a few ways.
This year they've got a bit more depth.
Well, if he's playing off the bench, it makes sense to get him on the field. So certainly makes sense. So I think for me with this option, I've got Seyfarth. I'm on similar Ben with Paulie on the Gilbert option. For me, I've had Gilbert before, so I've kind of got that in the back of my mind from when he didn't quite fire for me when I had him. So look, hopefully he'll look after you guys who pick him up. But Gilbert's not for me. Seyfarth's the winner.
Tommy Torima asks if we'd go Hetherington over Gilbert. Then, well, I have. That's what I've done. But Longy, what's your thoughts?
I mean, Hetherington's role is very uncertain. You've got some very good props at Brisbane. So you've got Pat Carrigan at prop, Payne Haas, Xavier Willison, Corey Denson. 3 of these guys were in Origin jerseys, and Willison's a future Origin player as well, or some sort of rep footy there. So I think that we'd be foolish to think that Carrigan won't play some lock in this configuration. The question is how much. So with Hetherington, you probably need 60 minutes out of him to get good scores because he's not a monster in terms of his points per minute. So
0.77, pretty consistent the last few years, which isn't too bad.
It's reasonable, but you need the big minutes. And I've had Hetherington in and out of my side. I've gone Gilbert over the bunch just because I think the job security and the role security is there. But I would agree with you that Seyfarth is the best fantasy scorer of the bunch with the worst job security. And in Hetherington, it's murky water, but he is nice and cheap. So Gilbert's my answer. But if going to Hetherington frees up some cash where you can do something valuable with it, then you can go that way as well.
The advantage of Hetherington is if he goes well, it's going to be a very hard decision to get on him. But if you start with him, and it's only one trade to get rid of him if it doesn't pan out. But we're really looking for that Joe Offengawi role. Joe Offengawi had PPMs of 0.64 before he went under Madge, and then he went up to 0.75 the first year and 0.84 the second year. Hetherington's been pretty consistent around that 0.77. If he can go up 0.1 and get to 0.87 under Madge, playing that same role that he had Offengawi play, and get an extension in minutes as well, he's going to score really well. So I think starting with him, but knowing that, look, it'll be a quick jump off if we don't see an improvement both in minutes and PPM. That's how I'm looking at it. I think it's going to be really, really hard to get Hetherington after 2 or 3 games because the question will always be the same, but will it last? And we remember that year Joe Offengawi had a big year. Nobody jumped on him because everyone said, well, now he's reached his limit. And he ended up costing over 700K. So that's the thing for me. The keg thinks that Hunt would go right to load up on Lomax. I'm not quite sure.
Hunt used to always go to the right side.
But he's playing on the left.
But he'll be on the left. Yeah.
We don't know which side Cobbo's going to play yet. They haven't. Would have to see tonight. Sorry. Yeah.
They are named for him to be on the left, but whether they go with that or not.
Yeah, because you've got Jesse Arthurs there who's played both spots, left and right. Demand and look, Cobbo could end up playing centre even though he's been named on the wing, right? Because those centres could move. The man thinking about taking Toera Mark this week, trade the one that Billy Smith doesn't replace next week because that way I can go to Hosking. Is that smart strategy, Longy?
It's a good strategy, yeah. So I've seen a few coaches with where they've missed Tamale and they're doing a similar thing. So they're jumping on Mark Nawani Tuase and Shibasaki knowing that they're going to make that trade. This is a good move. These guys are both big upside fantasy options. They're both big units, and they're both up against some smaller, less experienced centres at Brisbane as well. So I think this is a great move day, man.
Yeah, the predictor has Nwanga Tawaze at 49 tonight.
Oh,
Now,
huge.
Spicy.
if he scores that, I mean, I know the weather's not great. I know the Roosters don't have the same halves as last year, which the predictor won't take into account. So you probably got to do your own mathematics there. But still encouraging.
I just like the thinking that they've got a backup plan already. I love that. It's good because not like, especially when you're providing advice or people are asking for what you think you should do. So many times it's just like right there, right now, what should I do? And then there's no thought about next week at all. So that's next level galaxy brain. It's great.
That's what happens, isn't it? Round one gets split up into 2 weeks and we've got too much time on our hands. We start thinking about every possibility. It might be better just to chill and go with our gut. Ryder Brownwick, would you say it's a big deal having 170 cash?
Ooh.
I'm already happy with my team. Longy, I think it's a little bit too much money.
If you're giving up points, then absolutely it's too much. So if you look at your team and there's one guy there who's not going to score well and you could upgrade him, you should probably upgrade him. But if your team's perfect and you're happy with it and you know something we don't, then I guess it's not the worst thing, but just make sure you spend that money next week is the key piece.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of guys I could be happy to have 170k extra to spend. I can tell you now.
Yeah.
Especially with how many 250 guys a lot of people tend to have this year, and the gap from that to the 400 guys, I think we're going to see that quite significant in points.
Just get a 400 or a 350k guy instead of a 230 or a 250. Winter Collinson, got to drop one. Seyfarth, Gilbert or Bateman. Let's do it quickly around the ground. Start with you, Erik. Which one are you dropping?
Look, Seyfarth's the cheapest in this list, but for me, I had said my piece already. I'd probably stick with the other two and drop Gilbert for me.
Longy?
I drop Bateman, free up the cash, use it elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't think Bateman's price is going to get away from you. And I want to see him anyway because what we saw last year suggests he might be a player reaching the twilight of his career. Kyle Hurring, Haas and Bird or Hopgood and Marju. Longy, which way are you going here?
I mean, Marzu has so much more upside than Bird, right? So we're talking about if things go right for Bird, he can score 40. Marzu had a year last year where everything went wrong and he averaged 36. So I just think Marzu is going to really take off this year. And then Hopgood versus Haas. Haas is a better fantasy player, but not by enough to cover that gap. So I would go Hopgood, Marzu, give yourself the flexibility and roll with that.
And Hopgood, Erik, could have a lot of upside in these early rounds with Parramatta looking a little bit weaker on paper than what they have in years gone by. So he could play even more minutes and not only play more, but really the ball gets to him a lot, making even more tackles. I mean, he's a great worker anyway. He could really fly up in price. Whereas Haas, we know he can be a bit up and down at a very high level, but he goes anywhere between 780 to 900k through the year and back again. So you could get a bit of luck there, and Hopgood could make quite a bit of money, and you can get Haas for the same cost or even a bit cheaper at a later date.
I'm on the same boat. Hopgood and Marju, I think, has got the more upside. Both of those players have value. Haas might have the value, but with Bird, like we said, I'm running Bird even, but it's very much it could go either way, I think. So I think if Hopgood and Marju's on offer, stick with what you know and what's solid, and I think that's the more solid option for you.
Thoughts on Kawatu this year, asks Jay for Longy. And only a few minutes to go, so we'll wrap it up shortly. But what do you think about this one, Longy?
Yeah, I can give a quick fire on this. So for Ola Kawatu, he's priced at about 50. The bet you're making there is that he's going to be a generational talent in the back row, and he's going to bump up to 55 to 60. Now, does Ola Kawatu have that in the tank? Absolutely he does. Are Manly good enough to support it? I think that's a yes as well. It's just whether you think it's going to happen in the early season. So I don't mind Ola Kawatu. I haven't had him in my team, but I can definitely see the upside, especially against some new combinations for the Cowboys in round one.
Yeah, he's going to be a guy in a lot of people's fantasy teams at some point this year. Hunter's Universe, Ryan Couchman at 358. Is it a steal? Erik, I think it is. I think he is one of the secret weapons that if they didn't have a round 3 bye, I'd be starting with.
The problem is I was keen on him and I wanted to see him named, but at the same time, look at who he's behind though, and both of those boys can play quite big minutes. So Lucy and Sua traditionally play large, if not all, the minutes. So obviously he's named, he's on the bench, so he's going to come in somehow in some way. I just don't think he's going to get the minutes we want, even though it's at a great price. And if he was in any other side, I think he would be a definite shout. But with those two, I think he might lose the minutes you want him to have.
I've got him at 40 minutes and scoring 40, Longy.
Okay.
And he'll go up nearly 30k. But the problem is when other guys come back, right? We don't know what's happening with Blake Laurie. Hame Seli's still to come back. That's probably the problem. But all words out of Dragons camp is Shane Flanagan's very, very happy with the two Couchman boys.
I mean, there's no other options at that price in the forwards. So if you like,
especially edge, apart from Tuolagi, that's kind of the only other option you got.
Yeah. And are you going Humphreys? Anyone going Humphreys?
The question mark for Dodd is the problem there, and I don't want a question mark to be sold for next week because I feel like I'm already going to have issues. So I'm just going to bail early. He's great. We had a bit of a debate when we were in together, Paulie, and it can go really two different ways. So I'm happy to watch that one and how that all comes about, and then jump on if I need to later.
Watson to Munster is a good idea. Asked Mark Lawless. What do you? Okay, we'll go around the grounds again very quickly.
Yeah, it could definitely pay off. You save a bit of money as well, so I don't mind it for this round one matchup.
I like it. What about you, Erik?
Yeah, I like it, especially if it gives you like the Cleary and not a cheaper bloke. I think having a solid Munster in there is gonna work out in your favour.
George Vieta wonders about Kelma Tuolungi. I'm worried, Longy, I've got to say, with Volkman passing him the ball rather than... unless Dylan Brown moves sides.
Yeah, I'm selling all my shares for attacking stat Parramatta players right now. So Mitch Moses, about 6 weeks, it looks like. He is just such a good player and so important to Para that... I don't know. I find it hard to jump on Kelma. I mean, the stat case is there. He should average about 40. But Bryce Cartwright's in the reserves. You know, you've got Madison floating around as well. We've got a few other players. You know, Kautonga could pop up too. It's a tough round one matchup where Para might get beaten in this game. So I'm steering clear, but it could work out for you.
Final questions before we wrap up. Of course, if you're listening on the podcast, come next week to YouTube, the NRL page at 6:30 and join us. It's a good little community here that we're building, and then turn over and watch the game straight after. SBW Machiavelli, thoughts on Teddy this year, Erik?
We both started with him last year, Paulie. We're pretty happy with the result. I think he's got a lot of work to do. He's got the backing, and he's done it for years and years gone by. I just think he's got a lot to do this year with all those quite key injuries. He's got quite a bit of effort, and his price reflects how well he did last year. Instead of he's going to have a lot of focus in different areas compared to last year. I think we'll see him downtick for mine, and I'll be happy for that to happen and snap him up a little bit later.
Agree. Tough sledding.
Finally, got a bench of Hubner, Duffy, Sandon, Mamwazelos, Purdue, and Royce Hunt. Which three am I going to play? Another round the grounds, Longy.
These are the questions I like. I would bench Purdue and Royce Hunt. So a bit of rain in that Manly game. I think he's up against a tough Olakuatu Garrick edge most likely as well. And Royce Hunt just doesn't get the minutes, so probably not a guy I'm going to be starting.
Erik?
Two halves. They're just going to make points just for being on the field and hopefully kicking enough for us. That's why you've got him in your side, and Hubner's sitting in the middle. So I think he's gonna do us great work this week. So I agree with Longy.
Hubner, Mamwazelos, and I will go with Duffy. Leave Smith on the bench. Just waiting for those teams to come in, so hopefully they'll be in any minute, and then of course we can leave you to watch the footy. I mean, it's so exciting. We're going to do this each and every week. That's the beauty of it. Come here, enjoy, and it just really kicks off. Well, we'll be kicking off each round, right, from next week onwards with the Thursday night game, and this one, well, it's just resuming it after Vegas. Any last thoughts, Longy? What are you doing this round? Have you made any drastic changes since Tuesday, the team list?
Just paying attention to matchups. That's the big thing. So tonight, I'm pretty confidently starting Rob Toyer. I think he's got a size advantage on his edge there. And I think the Roosters will lose, but Toyer will be very good individually, and there'll be some good performances there. So look at those things. Start your guys that you think of upside, and just stick with your calls, right? Look at your team and think, what do I really think is going to happen? Who do I really want to watch? Jump on those guys.
What about you, Erik?
I think this is probably the least chaotic round one I've ever had. I think I did pretty well. I haven't actually changed my team since the team list came out. I did go Watson to Vega and upgraded another player, but I've since gone back on that and stuck with my guns. So I think I'll finally have a round one where I haven't done a last minute trade, and be happy that I haven't forgone all the effort I went to picking the side in the first place in the off season. What about you, Paulie?
Yeah, I'm similar. I went Sand and Smith. I was going to leave through to the keeper, but with the threat of rain around and also the news that Billy Smith's return from injury is imminent, I've just left Rob Toyer at the moment, even though I absolutely love him and still recommend him as a guy to buy. But because I went pretty heavy in the Vegas round, and I've got to. I can't get them all this week, basically. So I'll watch him. I'll watch the other centres and cheap winger fullbacks, and whoever really, really shows a lot this weekend is the one I can look to bring in round two. But for the cheap halves, well, I've kept all of them. So Cole, obviously from last week, Sand and Smith's going to go in tonight, and then Tom Duffy. So, and then Metcalf, well, who knows? That's going to be the big burning question for next week, right?
Absolutely. I think I've lost track of how many people are already planning the rage trade. So we'll see how that goes, and how people's self-control will go for your round two trades.
And just before we depart, the news obviously of Nat Butcher being out is confirmed now, with Siwa Wong playing lock and Taylor Losalu coming on to the bench. Hugo Savala will be the 18th man. Tyson Smithy, 18th man for Brisbane. They're 1 to 17. So Kobe will be starting at 13. And Jack Gashevsky starting in the second row. Wish me luck. I've got them both.
Got it. You got it.
I'll need it. Erik, Longy, thanks so much. I'm Paulie G. Make sure you download the official NRL podcast if you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, and vice versa, if you're listening, then get to YouTube next Thursday and watch us live at 6:30 onwards. But for now, switch over to 9, Foxtel or KO, wherever you like to watch your rugby league, and get amongst it. I can't wait.
It's the official NRL Fantasy